can give me the answer next time I see you.
I'll answer the next questions while I think of this. No, I've never put the Chinese foreign investment policy into perspective with regards to the Malian crisis. But what you said is true. Mali was one of the few states that had no presence of Chinese active involvement. The reason why, I cannot tell. It would have a combining effect in terms of economic development of Mali, making it probably somehow slower and more reliant on foreign aid, because what the Chinese policies is usually it's not seen as foreign aid. It's like investment. They don't ask for anything in return other than, profit. So maybe the lack of the presence could be seen as a contributing factor to the Malian economics not developing as fast as it should have. But what I'm wondering myself, what I wonder when I was doing this analysis, why did we not see that Mali was not as well as we thought it was, and this crisis was a bit of a surprise to most of the general public, let's say, because when we studied it, the indications were all there that Mali was a bomb ready to explode, and like Mali, Niger, even though, as you can see now, a relapse, and like South Sudan and Central African Republic, we're talking about current events. I think that most has to do with, as we see here in the previous slide, the set of key performance indicators that we choose, because Mali was part of a program to export democracy. So those involved in this had all the interest and the bias to show that Mali was a successful experiment, which doesn't answer the question about the Chinese investment, but okay, so I'm glad. But
thank you. Next, I think there was one behind before this one. No, no. Okay, this one. Sorry.
I again ask the same question I asked the other speaker. Which are your levers on which you try to prevent or, in a way, make the risk lower for a crisis?
This is an interesting question, and actually that's my line of business. As Stefano said, I teach at the Armed Forces College, which means I teach senior officers who are on their gateway to being directive staff in the armed forces, national and international staff. So I shape the mind of the people who will be making the decisions. What happened in the last few years is that the military came to the realization that military actions do generate effect, but those effects are meaningless and very short-lived if they do not belong to a wider strategy of intervention. Which means that the military first, and more than other actors in the international arena, felt the need to better understand what was going on before acting. Because when we put a military force in a theater, all they can do is use violence, use force, in a controlled way, but all they do is use the force, not in the Star Wars meaning. Which means that those actions that the military contingent will be carrying out should mean something more than use of military force. Because we're not asking the military forces to cancel an enemy out of the picture, but we're asking them to make things better for someone. So those military actions, which again I repeat are just the use of force, have to be connected with other efforts. What the rest of the international community is doing to make this happen, it's a matter for debate. And while the military forces are well structured and organized, the same cannot be said about the international arena, where you have many more interests at stake and different strategies that sometimes clash with each other, making for less than optimal solutions. So what we have to offer, and what we should see that by creating the premises for a better comprehension, we are allowing for anyone with a will to help to see and help that comprehension to make the intervention more effective. leverage point. We refer to usually instrument of powers because you need power to make a difference. The military being one of them, then of course there are the economic instrument of powers, diplomatic actions, and everything belonging to the civilian field, from impact project to developing program to security sector reform to everything that I'm sure in this room we have many experts, energy fields and mining, oil, and international cooperation with other actors. So everything must be part of the same strategy. But it's more like an ultimate goal, an end state, which I don't think will ever be reached. The United Nations are not able to generate homogeneous intervention, and the results are in front of everybody's eyes. Situations do relapse, and we haven't been able to solve one crisis in a definite way in the last 20 years as an international community.
Thank you. You're not satisfied, but maybe you can continue afterwards, because it's bar talk. Yes. So we move. First of all, thanks, Angelo. Thank you for your very nice presentation. And now let's move on with a presentation from Edoardo Mollona, University of Bologna. He will tell us about a strategy and scenario analysis by exploring industry dynamics in the long term. So I'll get your presentation. Yes, it's arrow right to go on.
Yes, I'm not a Mac user. Doesn't work.
There is a virus.
I will read my presentation. There is something personal. I don't know.
Something personal with your presentation. So close.
Oh, here we are.
It's a Mac. I'm sorry.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Well, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Edoardo Mollona. I teach strategic management and system dynamics at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering in Bologna. And well, when I was asked to, I was invited to this workshop, I was thinking of what could be useful to present. I mean, to people that wanted to understand whether, to what extent, the system dynamics could be useful for organization in general. So I thought of a project that we did in 2009, along with a colleague at the University of Lugano in Switzerland. Actually, we did the modeling at the other university, collected data. And I decided to present this because this is, I think it's a typical model of intervention with system dynamics to explain how how strategy could unfold over the year. And I think going back to Kim's remark of this morning, I think system dynamics has got with how things unfolds in time. And these were exactly the need of the people that we were talking with. The research context is the industry, Italian industry of fixture, aluminum fixture, which is the frame that you use to make window, basically. And our counterpart, I mean our client, let's call it this way, was the association of firms producing aluminum texture. So this association was interested in understanding, in kind of describing the industry scenario for the following years. Okay, so basically this is the fundamental value chain that I was looking at. Aluminum extrusion producer, back on there, then sell extrusions to the aluminum fixture producer, and then there is the final user, on which I will say a couple of words more later on. Then what are the pressure of these people? Well, competition with a kind of higher market, more expensive wooden fixture producer, more expensive aluminum and wood fixture producers, but more importantly, was the competition of the integrated polyvinyl chloride PVC fixture producer. The problem was, I mean, for them the problem was that the industry is made up of hundreds of small firms, basically. And these PVC fixture producers are few, very much integrated with a lot of economy of scale, and so low cost and low price, and relatively high performance. So basically, what these people wanted to know, and how we interacted with them. Well, we had a modeling team. We made up a modeling team with there was 3-4 people, me and my assistant, plus the chairman of the economic committee of this organization, plus a couple of firm entrepreneurs that decided to join us in the modeling. And I think another information that could be helpful, people wanting to approach system dynamics, I found very useful to find events like this, a room like this, where the people that were asking for the model could sit once every month, and you could present them partial results and then discuss with them, interact with them. Now, what they wanted to know, basically, were very simple, when many firms want to know these kind of things. What are the consequences of competition from PVC? What are the advantages of different strategy? More specifically, do we want to invest in brand recognition and differentiation, or investment in technology and scale, or what the effect of institutional exogenous disturbances? This sector, this industry, has quite a fairly high degree of potential regulation impact. You've got the eco-incentives, so the government will give you incentive if you substitute old fixture and for new fixture. You have pressure to increase thermal performances. UV is the indicator that tells you how a window, to what extent a window is able to transmit heat, or then to keep heat. So this number has to be low to have a good quality, high quality window. Right? And you have got a couple of pressure to decrease this number, so to increase the thermal performance of the window. First of all, because you have got competing competitors from other countries that have higher quality product, or because the government could basically force you or give you incentive to increase thermal performance. The model. I'll give you a very, very kind of high level presentation of the model. Is articulated in 5 macro sectors, the market, and 4 sectors that represent the strategy, where you can play with the strategies of firms into different sectors. Aluminium, wood, and PVC. Of course, our focus was the firm that produce aluminium, of course. So we are talking about, I mean, we were modeling, especially with a particular care, these people. We collected basically more than 150 income statement and balance sheets, and on these documents we created the kind of the average firms, okay? And then, so, concerning each strategy sector, we concentrated a part of course, pricing, for example, but there are 3 important choices. Investment in scale economy, investing in automation, so increase investment in capital, decrease labor cost, and investment in semi-finished good industrialization. This means basically investment in linking with the value chain of the extruder producer. Basically, he has got with logistics and try to invest in order to make your production and the production of aluminum in extruder producer connected and more efficient. Marketing, brand building, activate intermediaries as the distribution channel. And then the main market sector. Basically, as you will see, in the simulator, we have got a number of variable and buttons and levers with which you can simulate different segments of the market. Basically, you want to simulate something that has to do with, that gets similar to residential and building segment, residential final market segment. So when you sell fixture to people that are builders themselves for residential, or you sell fixture to people that build themselves their house. Service segment and base service segment. Advanced service segment, basically when you sell windows and fixture to very large firm, very large offices. So there are a lot of high investment. Okay, so okay, to give you an example, this is the typical interface that we built with, this is a, I think, software. And for example, here you've got some buttons that you can use to calibrate the kind of market that you want to deal with. So you have, sorry, the writing inside are in Italian, but I kind of explained on the outside. I didn't want to remake the model for you in English, but it's something that you can explain. So for example, for each segment, you can give more or less weight to, for example, sensitivity to price, okay? Here, you have you can decide to what extent you want to collaborate with the supplier of aluminum extrusion. Of course, if you choose to collaborate, you've got incremental costs, but then you've got some benefit. Here, you can, there are other things that are important to calibrate, because was one of the concerns that these people had, is the effect of institutional or governmental intervention. So, for example, the first one, you can decide what are the thermal performance required on average by the market. This means that, of course, if you decide to increase your thermal performance, you will increase cost in the short term, but probably you increase demand in the longer term, depending on which sector you are targeting. Then you can decide here whether the eco-incentive will be eliminated. If eco-incentives are eliminated, what happens is that the average lifetime of the product will increase, okay? And so this will be a problem because the substitution demand will go down. Then here you can decide in which year of the simulation the incentive will be dropped. And here you can decide to play around with rate of growth of each segment. Decide a yearly rate of growth. Basically, the first set of simulation was very simple, was try to understand what are the scenario if you want, for example, to reduce the thermal performance for 1.8 to 1.6, and you give, very simple, you give some scenarios from the optimistic to the pessimistic, and these people wanted to understand more or less of what, instead they didn't want a forecast, they wanted to understand the impact, the magnitude of the impact. He understood that I'm not using Mac because it's got something. Well, in the meantime, I must say that actually the Italian government played a little bit around with this incentive. So there was a number of announcements, so the people were very worried about what happened in the case that the incentive were basically introduced or dropped on the other. The second, okay. Right, so here is what is the effect of eco-incentive on the aggregate aluminum fixture demand. Of course, you have got a decrease because with different scenario here as well, because if you give a lifetime of 10 years to your fixture, of course, the eco-incentive will, if you drop the eco-incentive, you will have an increase in the lifetime 5%, 10%, depending on the assumption that you do. Interestingly, you've got also, I mean, this was a very interesting kind of time of interaction with other people, because you imagine these people sitting in this room and you present this scenario and you're kind of describing a bad scenario here, but then you see that the average sales of aluminum fixture goes up at one point, and these people say, well, but what's happening here? And, no? And then you have to explain that actually it's a matter of selection, that some of these firms will be selected out, and this is just to give you an example of how the one very simple feedback was explained to the people and helped, I think, to understand a little bit the dynamics. If the average lifetime goes up, decrease in substitution demand goes up, decrease in average sales goes up. Yes, we've got this in system dynamic, when you put arrows and you put plus or minus, means it doesn't mean that this will augment. It simply means that the two variables will move together. It's a kind of correlation. If you put minus, means that the two variables move in an opposite way. Okay. Competition and selection goes up. Number of aluminum producers goes down because there is a kind of shakeout in the industry, and then you have a decrease in average sales. A decrease in the decrease of average sales, so an increase in average sales, and this is a typical negative feedback. Okay, this is a kind of a glimpse on the structure of the model, which I think was one of the features that was interesting to understand for these people. Then you have got the decision making here. You can make a number of choices. You can decide price. You've got this graph that tells you how you are doing during the simulation. You have got an income statement. This is a typical income statement of one of these firms. Some flight simulator output. And then this is, I just took one simple result. This is, I mean, just what they wanted to know. One of the result that they wanted to know is the black one is the worst scenario for a strategy that set a price at 450 on average, and then in which you invest in production capacity, you invest in automation, and you invest in semi-finished good industrialization. No intermediation, no investment in brand. And down you've got the opposite. This is the best case of the opposite strategy, something that is more into become a seller of different kind of fixture. Now, going to the end, I will conclude. What did this experience, I think, was interesting, and how will in this kind of workshop that we used to have. Basically, we were in a room like this. We ran scenarios with these people. They wanted to know what happened if. What if analysis was, I think, extremely powerful for them. And specifically to this case, of course, we capture long-term dynamics of the industry of window fixture, threats, analysis of threats, so competition of large integrated producer of low-cost fixture, competition of high cost. But I think that this was very useful to understand what the opportunity of survival are. First, concentration. These seminars and this workshop was led to try to let them understand that they had to merge. They were too small in dimension. They needed to create larger firm able to invest in economy of scale. Second, technological innovation was key. Third, alliances. The people need to do alliances with or merger with other firm and make alliances with supplier or raw material. In general, what I think is useful of system and how it helps us elicit a feedback loop structure, explain why things happen in the long term, analysis of short-term and long-term consequence of the strategic decision. I think that the difference between short-term cost and long-term output is something that is very hard to understand without a model. Third, long-term benefit may be anticipated by short-term costs, and how these costs and benefits are distributed over time. And I think you can do this, I think, only with a simulation. in particular, simulation of scenarios to support the assessment of time necessary for benefit to emerge. How long I have to wait, for how long I have to suffer costs, for example, before looking and expecting benefit. Intertemporal cost-benefit analysis to take decision. Well, they think, okay, I got to stop. But let me give you on the unside, what happened on the unside. Well, the industry concentrated. The number of firms really decreased a lot. A number of alliances between between a producer of raw material and producer of fixture actually were completed. Interestingly, we made a survey recently. Of course, in between there is the economic crisis, which probably makes brought about some disturbances, but an interview was a survey decided that basically the people were saying that there was no advantage in differentiation, but there was an advantage in technology investment. So basically, our ideas, the ideas that we were playing around with this simulator, were partially confirmed by the on-site observation of what happened in the history in the following years.
Thank you.